Okay, this is just a little extra lesson here on something called the absolute value, which you're going to run into in the basic review units for Math 052 and Math 053. Um, Try not to get too hung up on this because this is the only place you're going to see this in these courses. It will come back potentially in the '07 level courses, depending which ones you take, which is why it's introduced here, so it's just not a brand new idea. But they really just want you to get the hang for what the absolute value does. And it's just a special operation that makes whatever is inside of it positive. Um, so a lot of times, if students will come to me and they'll say, "I've done all of chapter one, I've done all of chapter two, everything makes perfect sense, except one thing just totally confuses me," and I'll say the absolute value, and they say yes. It's really such a simple idea, and yet it causes so much confusion. So I'm going to go through a few examples here, and hopefully that will help. So why do we have this thing even in the first place? It turns out that often when you're doing math and science, especially science, there's situations where all we really care about is the size of something, not whether it's positive or negative. So, for example, if you have a car and you're driving forwards or backwards, north or south on the highway, and maybe we only care about how fast your car is going, not whether it's going in the positive direction or the negative direction. That's kind of a physics example where this would come up. So the way we represent this is we put two straight lines around a number, and what that says is simply take whatever's inside those two straight lines and make it positive. So if it's positive, leave it alone. If it's negative, make it positive. So here we have the absolute value. We would say the absolute value of 7 when we see that there with the two lines around the 7. That's just 7. And here we have the absolute value of -7, which is also just 7. Seems pretty simple, right? No big deal. Like I said, the confusion this can cause. So let's look at some examples. First of all, in order of operations, those absolute value signs, those two straight lines, actually function the same as a bracket. So when you're doing order of operations, if you have absolute value, the straight lines, you would work out what's inside them first as if that's a bracket and then go from there. So here is a couple examples. We have -3. Remember, this is times if we don't write anything in front of that bracket. Absolute value of 6 minus 2. So we got to work out that 6 minus 2 first. What is 6 minus 2? That's easy. 6 to the right, 2 to the left is 4. So you can see in red there, I worked out what is inside the absolute value. Now I evaluate what is the absolute value of 4. Well, the absolute value simply makes what's inside of it positive. Now, what I want you to notice here is that the -3 out front just stays there, right? But what happens to this blue part is you say, what is the absolute value of 4? In other words, make it positive. Well, it already is positive, so you don't change it. 4 is 4. The -3 out front just stays there. And now you work out the rest of it. I have -3 times +4. A negative times a positive gives a -12 for an answer. All right. So first of all, people sometimes after they try a few absolute values, they're like, oh, it makes everything positive. Then they get confused. How can I get a negative answer? I thought it made everything positive. Well, it did, right? Look at it made that 4 +4, which it already was. It didn't change it. And then you carry on and work out the rest of the equation with what's there, which is times -3. -12. Over here, we have inside the bracket a -10 plus 4, which we work out first, -10. So 10 to the left, 4 to the right means we went, subtract them, we went 6. The 10 is bigger, so we went further to the left, -6. And now what is the absolute value of -6? The absolute value makes whatever is inside it positive, which makes our answer 6. Common mistake people will make when they look at this one is they'll think, oh yeah, the absolute value makes everything positive, and they'll make that -10 into a +10 go 10 plus 4 is 14. No, that is incorrect. Remember, it's the same as a bracket, so you have to work out what is inside of it first, and then apply the absolute value, which makes everything positive. All right, now here's where things start to really confuse students. So the absolute value makes whatever's inside of it positive, but it doesn't do anything to the rest of the stuff that's around it. It doesn't magically make everything positive. If there's a negative in front of the absolute value doesn't touch that negative sign. So let's look at some examples here, and these are the common ones that people will get wrong. Not the first one. The absolute value of 12 is 12. Absolute value makes whatever's inside of it positive. No problem. But here, look at this. I have the absolute value of 12, but I have a negative sign out front. Let's separate those. We have a red negative sign out front, and then we have a blue absolute value of 12. We already know what the absolute value of 12 is from here. The absolute value of 12 is 12. So that blue part is 12. But there's still a red negative sign out front of it. The absolute value doesn't touch what's outside of it. It only makes what's inside of it positive. So there is still a negative out front. And the answer to this question is negative 12. And like I said, people will say, wait, I thought it makes everything positive. It did. It did make it positive, right? It made the thing inside of it positive, which it already was. And then there's a negative sign out front. Next one, we've already done one like this. The absolute value of negative 12, well, it just makes whatever's inside of it positive, so that's 12. But then again, look at this last one. We have negative, the absolute value of negative 12. Some people will look at that and say, oh, a negative is a positive. No, careful. We have to work out the absolute value first. So again, we have the red negative sign sitting out front. And then we have the blue absolute value of negative 12. What is the absolute value of negative 12? Oh, we just did that right here. Look at that. The absolute value of negative 12 is 12, right? So the blue part, the absolute value sign makes it positive. What is the absolute value of negative 12? It is 12. Absolute value sign's gone. But there's still a red negative sign sitting out front. So this is negative 12 for the answer. Okay, so the absolute value makes whatever is inside of it positive. It has no effect whatsoever on what might be outside of it. Here's another one that you're going to see in your practice and on your test. So we're told that A is negative 3 and B is negative 5, and we're told to plug into these various things and work each of them out. So here I'm looking at this first one. I'm putting the A. There's three things inside that absolute value sign, right? There's an A, a plus sign, and a B. I put them in color-coded, and we are going to replace the A with a negative 3 because that's what it tells us to do in red. In blue, we're going to place the B with a negative 5. And don't forget that plus sign is still sitting there in between them in orange. Okay, now let's work out what's inside this absolute value. Before we apply it, we have a negative 3, so that's going 3 to the left, and then another 5 to the left, so we've gone a total of 8 to the left, negative 8, when we add those together. And now that we've worked out everything inside the absolute value, which is like a bracket, now we say, what does the absolute value do? It takes whatever's inside of it and makes it a positive number. If it was already a positive number, it wouldn't change it, but because it's a negative, it makes it positive. Next one, we have negative, A is negative 3, then we have a minus sign, and then B is negative 5, so let's do that. A gets replaced by negative 3, B gets replaced by negative 5, and there is still a minus sign between them. Here we see our good old minus and negative, which we now know becomes plus. So we have negative 3 plus 5. That's 3 to the left, 5 to the right. Remember, we can't make these all positive yet. We got to work out what's inside first. 3 to the left, 5 to the right means we went positive 2 to the right in total. And now we have the absolute value of positive 2. Well, the absolute value makes whatever's inside of it, which in this case is a plus 2. makes it positive. It already is positive, so it doesn't change it. Some people will start flipping that to a negative. Careful. The absolute value doesn't change the sign. The absolute value just makes it positive. If it's already positive, nothing changes. If it's negative, it becomes positive. Next one, again, we have A in red, B in blue, and then we have a plus sign between them, but this time the A and the B are each in their own absolute value sign. So replace the A with a -3 and the B with a -5. Now, what is the absolute value of -3? The absolute value makes that +3. Then we have a plus sign there, which doesn't just disappear, it stays there. And the absolute value of -5, the absolute value makes it +5. So this is actually just 3 plus 5, 3 to the right and 5 to the right, which is 8. How about this last one? Again, A in red, B in blue, and then this time there's a minus sign between them, which I put in orange. Replace the A with -3 and the B with -5, and the orange minus sign stays there. And again, this is all worked out, so what is the absolute value of -3? +3. Then there's a minus sign. What is the absolute value of -5? It is +5. So look carefully at this. I actually have 3 to the right and 5 to the left, right? Because that's a +3, even though I don't bother to write it. 3 to the right and 5 to the left means I actually went 2 to the left in total. -2 is the answer to that one. And again, you notice that just because there happens to be some absolute value signs doesn't necessarily mean you always get a positive answer. The absolute value operates just on what's inside of it and makes it positive, right? It made this -3 +3. It made that -5 +5, but then I am subtracting 3 minus 5, so I do get, in the end of this one, a negative answer. And then I think I got one more here with a little bit more order of operations. And I've got a recommendation here. If you got a bunch of stuff inside an absolute value like this, right? We got all this inside the absolute value. Remember, you have to work that out first before you can apply the absolute value. So I recommend you take that over to the side, right? So everything inside the absolute value I put in blue. I've taken it over off to the side, and I'm going to work it out. Order of operations says I got to do my multiplication first. 8 times 2 is 16. Now I got left 23 and right 16, or in other words, I'm going in opposite directions, so I subtract. 23 minus 16 is 7. I went further to the left, so it is -7. Now I'm going to take that -7 that I got, and I'm going to replace it back in here. Right? I worked out that entire blue bit. It worked out to be -7, so I pop it back in. And I think I'm going to get rid of the colors there. Yeah, so here's what I end up with. Okay, I got -12 minus, now I got an absolute value right here. Whoops. Right. No, it's not going to let me do it. Nope. Absolute value of -7. What is the absolute value of -7? I'm going to separate things out there. I got a -12, you see I put in purple. Then I got a minus sign, I put in blue. Then I have the absolute value of -7, I put in red. What does the absolute value do? Very simple. It makes it positive. So it turns that -7 into a +7. Notice everything else stayed the same. There's still a -12 there. There's still a minus there. But the absolute value of -7 we can evaluate as just simply being 7. Now I just got to work out the rest of this question. I just have 12 to the left and another 7 to the left. Add them together. I went a total of 19 to the left. -19. Okay, so absolute value. It makes what is inside of it. Once you evaluate the thing inside of it, it makes it positive. It doesn't affect anything outside of it. Right? It doesn't magically turn other things positive, just the thing that's inside of it, and then you plug that back in and carry on from there and work out the rest of whatever it is you have to do with your order of operations. Hope that helps a little bit with what sounds like a really simple idea, makes it positive, but causes all kinds of confusion for students.